In today's episode, we're doing something different. We're telling the story of a woman whose husband committed a violent crime. How did she unravel what he had done? What was it like when she discovered the man she loved had a hidden dark side? You'll hear Shannon Moroney's journey through her own words, from an interview she did with court junkie writer Gabrielle Roussin, and from excerpts from her memoir, Through the Glass. It's a perspective we don't often hear about, at least not on this show. In a normal court junkie episode, we tell the stories of what happened in a case through what later comes out in a courtroom. We hear the testimony from the officers involved and the witnesses and victims' loved ones, and sometimes the defendants. And we know the defendants most times have supporters too, whether they're innocent or truly guilty. But we don't normally get to hear about what it's like to be on that side, especially when you didn't do anything wrong, but you're trying to process what someone you loved did. This is Jillian in partnership with Law and Crime. You are listening to Court Junkie. When your sheets start failing you, it's never usually something that happens all of a sudden. It's the small things you start noticing. Like they start to feel scratchy or they start pilling, the worst. Or maybe you just start waking up in a sweat, more uncomfortable than you're used to. I hate that. If your sheets are pilling, thinning, slipping, or overheating, that's your sign that it's time to upgrade to Boll & Branch. You guys know I'm a huge fan of Boll & Branch. Boll & Branch's signature sheets are made from 100% organic cotton and designed to hold their shape, stay breathable, and feel luxuriously soft night after night. We also have their waffle blanket, which is a relatively new addition to our bed set, but it's light, perfectly soft, and like the sheets, gets even softer with every wash. And it's not just in my head. My Oura Ring even tells me that I've been sleeping better, and I think it's thanks to Boll & Branch. Sleep sound with Boll & Branch. Get 15% off your first order plus free shipping at bollandbranch.com/court with the code COURT. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/court. Code COURT to unlock 15% off. Exclusions apply. I always tell myself that I'm going to get better at meal planning. I'm going to get better at meal planning. But then before I know it, the weekend is over and the crazy busy week is about to begin. I missed my chance once again. But what finally clicked for me is that some nights I have more time than others. Some nights I can actually cook a meal, but other nights I just need something to heat up or we just need dinner fast. Those nights are mainly when my daughter has soccer or Girl Scouts or ice skating. And that's why Marley Spoon works really well for us. They actually adapt with you and have options for all of it, so that meals fit your schedule and not the other way around. And it still helps us eat well. Everything is chef-designed, made with quality ingredients, and balanced enough to feel good about. Marley Spoon has a wide range of ready-to-cook, prepared meals, and ready-to-eat options, as well as market items to help you stock up on snacks and beverages for the between-meal moments. And Marley Spoon understands that we all eat differently. Your tastes, preferences, and interests, culinary or dietary, are always covered. Their meal selection is always evolving with fresh updates, offering something for everyone and letting you personalize every order. Our most recent Marley Spoon meal was Martha's Best Chicken and Lemon Butter Orzo. It was a one-skillet meal that tasted like I had put way more time and effort into it than I actually did. What I love about Marley Spoon is how ridiculously easy it is, and how no matter what type of meal you choose, it tastes like you just made everything from scratch. So if you too are hungry now after hearing all of this, head on over to marleyspoon.com/offer/court for up to 25 free meals. That's right, up to 25 free meals with Marley Spoon. That's marleyspoon.com/offer/court. Make sure court is in all uppercase for up to 25 free meals. I'm going to start at the beginning, when Shannon met Jason. It was an unexpected place to find love. 27-year-old Shannon was a high school guidance counselor doing community service with her students at Martha's Table. Martha's Table was like a soup kitchen meets a restaurant. The patrons paid $1 for a meal, but the volunteers tried to treat them like they were in a Michelin star restaurant. Martha's Table catered to low-income residents in Kingston, Canada, a place known as the prison capital of Canada, since it was home to Corrections Canada and had 9 prisons nearby. Many of the people inside the restaurant had served time in their past. Jason Staples was the head cook in charge of corralling the volunteer helpers. He assigned Shannon to dish out the soup. Shannon noticed how handsome Jason was, even if he was covered in flour. There was something special about him, Shannon wrote, when she met 33-year-old Jason for the first time. For a moment, I felt as though there was no one else in the room. He seemed gentle and hardworking, leading the new volunteers.
Quite tall. He's about 6'3". I could see that he had dark curly hair under that, and he had flour all over him. He was making quiche that day, and I always forget if he was making quiche that day or if he was making chicken a la king from donated Kentucky Fried Chicken. I think I probably wrote it properly in the book, and now I forget. But at any rate, I remember that, and he had glasses on. He looked a little like Clark Kent. And then when he sort of he assigned all the duties to everybody, and I was put on soup ladling and just minding the soup while it was finishing. And he was just really sort of soft spoken, a really nice voice, like a big teddy bear in a way. And then he took his hat off at some point and his glasses. And that's when I noticed now he looked like Superman. From Clark Kent to Superman, beautiful blue eyes, really just gorgeous.
The volunteers got a quick dinner break too, and Jason invited Shannon to join him. They ate under a stairwell with their plates on their laps and connected as they talked about their lives, their favorite movies, their hobbies. Shannon learned Jason was an aspiring artist. By the end of the night, Jason gave Shannon his phone number. Their first date was over a mug of tea at a cafe on a snowy day. And in that cozy setting, Jason revealed a terrible secret. He confessed he had served 10 years in prison. He was out on parole with a life sentence. He had been convicted of second-degree murder.
The shock that just ran through me as I sat on that first date, sipping tea and looking at this gorgeous guy, having experienced him as just such a tender, capable, thoughtful person. And knowing that there were so many ex-convicts eating there that day, that he was serving, that we were serving. No one in a million years would have thought that actually he was an ex-convict, let alone that he could have been capable of taking a life.
Jason told Shannon the details of what had happened. His home life had been troubled. At 3 months old, he was finally adopted after being cared for by 3 foster families. His adopted father died from cancer when he was 6. His adopted mother was mentally unstable and drank. She had severe bipolar disorder and didn't properly take her medicine. When Jason was still in high school, he had just turned 18, his mom and her boyfriend moved away, leaving Jason on his own. Jason's mom found him a roommate, a 38-year-old woman, a friend of a friend. Jason and the older woman began sleeping together. His life then began to fall apart. His grades dropped. He was broke. He practically dropped out of high school. He wanted to move back in with his mom, but she said no. One night, he snapped. His roommate turned down his sexual advances. They got into a fight. "I'm going to tell your mom what's really going on," the woman yelled at Jason. In that cafe on his first date with Shannon, Jason recounted, I only remember wanting her to stop screaming at me, struggling to the ground and striking her head on the bathroom floor until she stopped. He said that he wasn't aware of what he was doing until it was over, Shannon wrote. After the murder, Jason served 10 years in a medium security penitentiary. A judge felt sympathy for him because Jason was young and had no prior criminal record. So he was moved to a minimum security facility and was allowed out on work release to start working at the restaurant. He began splitting his time, staying at a halfway house and his own apartment since he was still on parole. Jason said someday he hoped he would be completely free and off parole. I've been given a second chance, and I never want to go back to prison, he told Shannon, as she recounted in her book. The cafe was closing, and Shannon and Jason walked outside in the frigid cold by Lake Ontario. I thought to myself, shouldn't I be afraid? This man is a convicted murderer, Shannon wrote. I tuned into my body and searched for any signs of visceral fear, but there were none. I looked at him, trying to find signs of danger, but there were none. I simply wasn't afraid. It surprised her how normal Jason was. Their date came to an end and Jason had to go check in at the halfway house. She thanked him for being honest with her. She had never had a conversation like this before, certainly not on a first date. He thanked her for listening to him. They said goodbye with a hug. With her mind swirling, Shannon headed home. Since today's episode takes place in Canada, we enlisted some help to get more insight into how the legal system operates there.
I'm Noah Weisbord, and I'm a law professor at McGill University. The main difference between the US and Canada when it comes to criminal law is that criminal law in Canada is centralized across the entire country, meaning that there's one criminal code that's made by Parliament, the legislature in Ottawa, that governs every single province, where in the United States, every state has its own criminal code, and there's also federal criminal law. So we have one single criminal law that goes across Canada. It comes from the same source. The Canadian criminal law comes from the same source as the criminal law in Florida or in the rest of the United States, and that's the English common law. So what you got was the reception of the English common law in these various states in the United States and in the provinces in Canada. And then when Canada became confederated, became a single country, its own country, then there was a single criminal code based on the British common law that came. Another difference is that in Canada, there's a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's built into our Constitution. So any criminal law that violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Constitution, can be read down or can be declared by a court null and void, meaning that it's no law at all. The Supreme Court can slash down or eliminate unconstitutional criminal laws. So those are the key differences.
Professor Weisbord, who works in Montreal, told us that another major difference is that Canada doesn't have the death penalty.
It used to have a death penalty, but it doesn't have a death penalty any longer. And there's a big debate about the maximum sentence in Canada and whether, for example, if somebody murders, first-degree murder, meaning premeditated, deliberated murder, or murder of a police officer, or murder with some other aggravating circumstance, for example, with a sexual element to it, whether you can stack those different convictions on each other, meaning, 25 year, there's, for example, first degree murder, the penalty for first degree murder is life in prison, 25 years without parole, where for second degree murder, that's, an intentional killing, but that doesn't have one of these aggravating factors like the sexual nature or terrorism, it's life in prison, 10 years without parole. So often the question is with, for example, a serial killer or a terrorist who kills multiple people, Canada, whether those can be stacked, whether you can have someone with a 200-year sentence because they've killed or 5 life sentences. And the answer is no, you can't have that in Canada. You can have that in the States, though. There's no life without parole. So you have to have a chance of, and that's assessed on the basis of how the person has basically dealt with prison life and whether they've changed over time. And there's a special board of lay people and experts that assess whether the person is still a danger.
He said a life without parole sentence is considered unconstitutional.
It's considered to be unconstitutional and treating the person without dignity to say that they have no capacity to change. So the idea is that there were some Supreme Court cases that determined that everybody has to be assessed to see whether they're actually able to, be rehabilitated, and that once somebody has served their time, which is set by the legislature, then it's over, and then it becomes a question of whether there's still a danger to the public or not.
Professor Weisbord said the courtrooms in Canada look similar to American ones. There's a prosecution, a defense, expert witnesses, and both sides making closing arguments. A jury can deliberate, but so can the judge in a bench trial. But in Canada, courts play a major role.
It's not just the legislature that determines penalties, for example, where in the States there's often kind of a pressure on the legislature to become tougher and tougher on crime. And there's a pressure on prosecutors, if they're elected, or judges that are elected, to become tougher and tougher on crime because of the political dynamics in order to keep the community safe, this kind of dynamic. But in Canada, the courts have a lot more power, and they can strike down as unconstitutional legislation that was drafted and passed by the legislature because it treats the person as irredeemable, for example, or without dignity. So the courts have a bigger and stronger role in Canada than they do in the United States.
Despite Jason Staples' shocking confession that he had killed somebody and served time, Shannon wanted to see him again. But she also wanted to learn more about who Jason was today, and that meant understanding his past. And Jason was cool with that. He urged her to call his team of support directly.
Even before we really started dating, I mean, we were spending time together. I immediately had gone to meet his parole officer, his psychologist, all the people in his life. And no one had any concern that he would ever reoffend. When I met him, he was 33. He'd been 18 when he committed this murder. He had pled guilty, and it was the same, like everyone knew, but you just sort of had to come to terms with it. And the way that I came to terms with it, I think, was actually through a concept of forgiveness. Not that it was my place to forgive him, and I wouldn't ever forgive the crime of murder. But this quote about forgiveness, I think it's actually Mark Twain. I can't remember. That said, forgiveness means letting go of all hopes for a better past. And that is the way that I came to accept Jason's past and become very much part of his present and future.
What was wrong with Jason? How could he commit such a crime? Shannon recalled asking his parole officer. No one really knows, the parole officer told her, but the offense is considered a one-time incident, and we're not concerned that he will ever reoffend. Jason had been a model prison inmate, and now that he was regaining some of his freedom on the outside, his re-entry into society was going great, his parole officer assured her. Shannon kept digging. She wanted to know why Jason would have killed his roommate. It was hard to get an answer, but Jason's psychologist showed Shannon a report where another psychologist labeled the crime as a result of adolescent rage resulting from narcissistic injury. The psychologist also told Shannon that Jason was not dangerous. Shannon and Jason began spending more time together, going out to dinner, on hikes, working together at Martha's table. She tried to go on a date with somebody else, but it just made her more convinced that she was falling in love with Jason. It didn't take me long to realize that I was happiest with Jason, happier than I'd been in any other relationship my whole life. He instilled in me an ease of being, as if I had known him my whole life, Shannon wrote. Shannon had grown up in the suburbs of Toronto with loving parents. She was a middle child. She was studious, good grades. But there was also a sense of sadness. She often felt lonely.
My mom had many medical hardships. And so she was in the hospital on and off when I was growing up. And we all just helped out. I remember my dad taking us to visit her, or being a little concerned for a while. We had a Red Cross homemaker take care of my brother and I when my sister was born. My mom was very ill. So I would just say, I think I was a very responsible child. I loved doing crafts. I was just, I think, like, I don't know, I was well behaved and got good marks in school and stuff, but I was a little bit lonely.
In high school, 2 beloved teachers died from AIDS. And as a teenager, the priest at Shannon's Catholic church was arrested for sexually abusing boys. Then came a string of deaths in her family. She went to college and studied international development, going abroad to Ecuador. She returned home to Canada and went to Teachers College in Toronto. That lonely feeling was always hard for her to shake.
Jason, for me, was a cure for that loneliness. And we need our kindred spirits close to us. And Jason was a kindred spirit, just the kind of person that you feel you can completely be yourself with. It just gave me a sense of grounding and belonging that I just was what I wanted so much. That's just what I wanted for my whole life. And the thought of one day having a family, it was just kind of everything I wanted personally. And we just got along just so well. He was really funny. He could be just very lighthearted and playful. We just loved riding our bikes together. We always had kind of a simple, like a beautifully simple life.
Their relationship was progressing. 3 months in, Shannon introduced Jason to her parents. They liked him. And then afterwards, Shannon shared the terrible truth about her new boyfriend. What parents want to find out their daughter's boyfriend is an ex-convict on life parole for murder, Shannon wrote. But their reactions gave her hope. Her father said he trusted Shannon to make the right decision. Shannon's mom wanted to speak to Jason and to hear about it directly from him. Shannon's family began deep conversations with him, and over time, her parents' fears and doubts gave way. They loved Jason too. A month later, Shannon and Jason moved in together. Within a year of meeting, there was more good news. The parole board granted Jason full parole. That meant a step towards normalcy. He wouldn't have to go to the halfway house anymore and would only see his parole officer once a month. With everything going their way, the couple bought a house.
We really never argued. We bought this little house and we started on the renovations. It was the early HGTV days. He always greeted me after work with a smoothie or with something that he cooked or baked. I just really felt like I could tell him anything. I was understood. And, everyone who knew him felt that way. He was like the wounded healer.
Just after Christmas in 2004, they got engaged while on a walk to the top of the hill behind their house. Shannon was excited to have children and to start a family. They got married less than a year later in the fall of 2005. And just 1 month after that, everything would come crashing down. The other day, I wore my brown cashmere sweater from Quince, and I got 2 compliments on it in just one day. One was my mom, so maybe that doesn't count, but the other was one of my friends I was having lunch with. Quince is all about elevated essentials that feel effortless. I'm talking 100% organic cotton sweaters, premium denim made with stretch for all-day comfort, luxe cotton cashmere blends perfect for the changing seasons, everything you need for a wardrobe that actually lasts. Better yet, Quince works directly with safe, ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen, so you're not paying for a brand markup, just high-quality clothing. Quince uses the highest quality materials like 100% European linen and organic cotton. Everything is built to hold up season after season. The stitching, the fit, the fabrics. It recently got warmer out here in Chicago. We sort of jokingly refer to it as a false spring, since we know snow will likely make another appearance or two before actual spring starts. But while this weather is here, I'm able to wear my navy blue jacket I have from Quince that I just love. I've had it for quite a few seasons now, and it honestly has held up better than some of my other jackets that I paid way more for. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/court for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/court to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/court. Okay, raise your hand if you've been putting off some sort of doctor appointment. Maybe it's a dental cleaning or an annual checkup or blood work. Maybe something's been bothering you and you know you should get it checked out, but instead you keep putting it off. Okay, my hand is up too. When something feels off with me, I tend to search for my symptoms online and then try to self-diagnose, which usually ends in convincing myself that something is horribly wrong. Or I just incessantly complain to my husband and then don't do anything about it. Sound familiar? This year, we're doing things differently. We are finding amazing doctors for ourselves and booking appointments with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality, in-network doctors so you can find someone you love. Whether you're looking for dermatology, dentistry, primary care, eye care, or one of the other 200-plus specialties offered on ZocDoc, you can easily search by specialty or symptom to build the care team that's right for you. You can book an in-person visit or a video visit, whatever fits with your schedule. Once you find a doctor you think you might like, you can check out thousands of verified patient reviews to give you a real sense of who your doctor is. Maybe they hate small talk just as much as you do, or maybe they root for your favorite sports team. Go Bears. When you're ready, you can see their real-time availability and click to book instantly. No phone tag, no waiting around. Appointments made through ZocDoc happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments. Next time I need a doctor, I'm using ZocDoc. Stop putting off those doctor appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/court to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/court. ZocDoc.com/court. Thanks, ZocDoc, for sponsoring this message. Shannon Moroney, a newlywed married for 1 month, was writing her wedding gift thank you cards when a police officer knocked on the door. She was staying in a hotel while attending a guidance counselor conference out of town. Her world was about to explode. "I'm here about your husband, Jason," the officer told her. "He was arrested last night, charged with sexual assault." "My stomach flipped," Shannon wrote. "I felt like I was going to be sick. How was this possible? Desperation now pushed into my chest, making it hard to breathe. I had to stay calm. This can't be happening." The dark details came later. Jason had kidnapped and violently raped 2 women who had been customers at the health food store he worked at. He had held the first 46-year-old customer by knife point in the store's back room, bound her with duct tape, and brutally sexually assaulted her. When the second customer, a 26-year-old woman, entered, Jason pulled out his knife and choked her to unconsciousness when she tried to fight back. Then he sexually assaulted her, too. Then Jason, who normally rode a bike to work, rented a van to transport the 2 women back to his and Shannon's house. He wrapped the women in garbage bags with holes poked in them and then drove them back to his house. Amazingly, the women survived. In her book, Shannon wrote that when she arrived at the police station, a sergeant told her, "The women were very brave. It could easily have been a double homicide." Even bound with tape, unable to see, the women had tried talking to Jason. He was planning to die by suicide. He typed up a suicide note and posted it on his artist website. "Hi, everyone," Jason wrote. "I'm not sure who will be reading this. Police, loved ones, family, friends, my victims, whoever you may be. I just wanted to apologize to everyone that I've hurt. I have no right to expect forgiveness, and unfortunately, I don't have any answers to give you either. Please know that there is nothing any of you could have done to change me. Some of us are just this way. Take care and appreciate life." Signed, Jason. The women, who stayed calm while trying to survive, persuaded him not to hurt himself. Whatever they said connected. Jason went to a nearby payphone. He called 911 at about 10:45 p.m. and asked to speak with police. He confessed and said he wanted to turn himself in. Then he waited. The police never showed up. Shannon wrote, "They thought it was either a joke or a trap." Jason went back to the payphone and called 911 a second time, asking for authorities to rescue his captives. As he was getting back into his van, authorities finally arrived. They had traced the payphone call and knew this was real. Jason was arrested. Shannon later realized that she had called Jason before she went to bed at about 10:20 p.m. that very night. The conversation kept playing in her head. Shannon thought he had sounded tired, but had no idea about the horrors that were unfolding. "I love you, but I can't really talk now," Jason had said. She assumed he was focused on painting or some other work at the house. She quickly shared that a motivational speaker at the conference reminded her of him, somebody who had overcome great odds. She wrote that Jason said, "Thank you, that means so much to me right now. I love you, but I can't talk." Now, with the police officer standing in her hotel room, Shannon thought of that goodnight call in a different light. The 2 victims had been held prisoner in her home, while Jason and Shannon had been chatting. Shannon couldn't go home right away. Her house was a crime scene. With Jason arrested and Shannon needed at the police station for questioning, her parents rushed over. "My mom stepped through the door first, and as soon as I saw the fear in her eyes, I broke down in tears," Shannon wrote. She recalled telling her mom, "Jason's broken and we can't fix him." Jason faced a slew of charges, including kidnapping and aggravated sexual assault. He was arraigned in a court, and the judge read the charges out loud. Jason stood handcuffed in an orange jumpsuit, refusing to make eye contact with Shannon and her parents, who were seated nearby. Then the quick hearing was over, and Jason was escorted out of the courtroom, leaving Shannon behind with questions. Who had she married? How could he do something like this? What was going to happen to Shannon's life now? She was in a fog of despair. A police officer questioned Shannon and made her analyze her life with Jason. Had he ever been violent with her? Did they have a normal sex life? Shannon insisted that she had never known this evil side of him before. He had been a kind and gentle partner. But things weren't what they had seemed. Shannon soon learned more about her husband's dark side. She learned that he had been secretly filming her and other people while they were in the bathroom at their home. When he had gone to call 911 on himself, he had brought the videotapes into the rental van with him. The officers told Shannon that made her a victim of voyeurism. She was asked to watch the tapes to identify the other victims he recorded as well. She later watched a video of herself getting out of the shower. She wrote, Jason himself appeared on tape several times. He would adjust the camera, leaning in close so that he was framed in the lens. I looked at this face, but my Jason was not there. It was the same skin, features, and his hair, but his eyes were vacant. He was the man I had seen in court that first day, a dead body standing. In her police interview, Shannon said she felt like the officer was insinuating that she should have known that Jason was a predator of women. She thought she heard blame in his voice. Nothing prepared me for finding myself the target of these suspicions. How could Jason have done this to me? How could he have betrayed our vows and left me here to be scrutinized? Shannon wrote in her book.
I was actually a victim of a lesser offense of voyeurism that Jason had committed, kind of leading up to the crimes against these women. But that's not how I was treated, by and large. I was just treated as I must be delusional, naive, abused, anything that could make me out to either be pathetic, different from others, or culpable was how I was presented.
Jason's suicide note left her wanting more answers, too. Some of us are just this way. She reread his words again.
It was all just so profoundly sorrowful. All of it. I remember people really wanting me to get angry. I actually specifically remember one person in my extended family saying, Shannon, where is your anger? And I'm feeling like I'm such a disappointment. Like I'm not reacting the way you want me to react. And I had anger, of course, but my heart was just too broken to hold on to it for very long. I'd had these outbursts of frustration or just like, Jason, why didn't you tell me any of this was going wrong? Like you could have told me anything. Was there something that did I not make sure you knew that I would love you no matter what? Why didn't you tell me? I would have helped you. Even if he told me any of these things were going wrong and it meant that I had to call his parole officer and he'd go back into prison for a while, I would have done it.
Jason decided to plead guilty. According to Shannon, he confessed to her that he had been addicted to pornography for years. He was embarrassed and kept it hidden from her. He also admitted he began voyeurism in the past few months. He explained that he had always known something was wrong with him, but he convinced himself that he was in control of whatever it was, experiencing long periods of time when he was unplugged from his demons, time when there was no interference with the wires in his brain, Shannon wrote. Recently, the addictive behaviors had been building again, though he couldn't explain exactly why. He had also racked up $3,500 in credit card charges, spent on porn, and he kept it hidden from her. Allowed to return home, Shannon wrote that she searched through her house, although she had no idea what she was looking for. I reached my hand down into the pockets of every article of his clothing, hoping that I would find a note to explain everything. As I searched, I cleaned and scrubbed. I felt compelled to remove the stain of crime, Shannon wrote. Some people who had once been Shannon's friends and colleagues freely expressed their disgust when they learned Shannon was still communicating with Jason and visiting him in jail. I hated what Jason had done, and I couldn't condone or accept his choice to harm, but I couldn't write him off as a monster, Shannon wrote. I knew he was, in fact, very human, a human who had acted inhumanely. Meanwhile, Jason's crimes appeared in the news.
what could I say, the slant on the story was just always made it look like he was a violent criminal, a murderer who had just been let out and then violently sexually assaulted these women and was back. And so any one of us, but especially me, who knew him, who'd accepted him, who had context, who understood the length of time, 18 years between offenses, that even though we knew what he did before, that had always been explained as like a one-time act of adolescent rage. It just honestly just put me up for a scrutiny that was almost unbearable, and just so extraordinarily painful to live through, and essentially being charged and convicted of guilt by association by society.
Shannon took a leave of absence from her career as a guidance counselor. She said her principal told her that parents didn't want their children near her. She wrote that her colleagues gossiped about how a guidance counselor could possibly be good at her job if she had married an ex-con. The school community was shocked Shannon had been visiting Jason in jail. Adding to that was the fact that one of Jason's victims was a stepmother to a student at the school where Shannon worked. Shannon was told she could relocate to another school with a job opening on the other side of town. And one more thing, the principal said, according to Shannon's book. Don't come into school without permission. It's too upsetting for people to see you. You represent something terrible. Shannon wrote that she left the meeting stunned. After all, she wasn't the perpetrator.
I know your listeners will maybe not have gone through what I've gone through, but everybody has gone through something really difficult, a loss in the family, a divorce, whatever it is that, you find out. We always say, like, you find out who your friends are, but what we actually find out is really who people are when put to the test. So people can say that they're compassionate. They can say they're non-judgmental, but when push comes to shove and something happens, that's when, we kind of react automatically based on who we are and where we are at in our lives. And you can't really accurately predict who would react in which way.
As Shannon lost her friends and her job, she couldn't access any victim services to help her navigate everything. She called the Attorney General to ask about therapy being covered, but she wasn't eligible. Programs were being put into place to promote offenders' accountability and rehabilitation and healing for victims of crime. But still, by virtue of me being Jason's wife, I was left out, Shannon wrote. The new single Shannon seemed unrecognizable. She lost 20 pounds, and she was diagnosed with PTSD. She began getting therapy. What helped was creating art. Not beautiful pictures, but raw, personal ones. She cut a piece of her wedding dress and added it to the canvas as she made a collage of images and words and textures. She started going to a bereavement group to help her process the loss of her husband. Over time, she went on occasional dates. Her life took steps forward. She traveled to study abroad in England and made new friends. She began pursuing her master's degree. Her career was going to change, and Shannon's new career was focused on restorative justice.
Very often we don't hear about the emotions, the real emotions and the gamut of emotions that victims of crime experience, that family members experience. And there can sometimes be this lust for anger out there, or we want it on courthouse steps. Like, we want to see, I don't know why, we want to see anger. But for all of the victims that I've worked with over the years since becoming a trauma therapist and advocate, and the responsibility taking offenders that I work with and the family members of both, the most profound and universal feeling is of sadness of how this could happen. anger is normal, natural. It just doesn't really do much in the end. It leaves us exhausted. It leaves us drained. It leaves us feeling powerless often. And the healing that we need usually comes from understanding, connection, compassion, accountability, responsibility, being supported to grieve our losses, being supported to become whole again, no matter what has happened, in the best way possible, and being allowed to shape our lives, by what has happened, but not have crimes or violence control our life anymore.
Shannon continued to visit Jason, spending Christmas and his 36th birthday there in the prison. She said in those visits, Jason opened up to her. He told her that when he was a kid, he had been sexually abused by his adopted mom, as well as his mom's boyfriend. He also said he grew up with what he called the blackness in his thoughts. It was a feeling that came over him and made him feel like he was unworthy, he said. At 18, while serving his sentence for killing his roommate, Jason said he was gang raped. He said he never told anyone that before. He said he thought he deserved it for killing her. Even though Jason was pleading guilty, the legal process was slow. Other questions had been raised. Would Jason be deemed a dangerous offender in Canada? Professor Weisbord explains what the status means in the Canadian courts.
A dangerous offender is someone who's done a violent crime, typically. There's sex offenders as well. There's certain rules that apply to notifying the communities or related to the privacy of the offender. So there's several distinctions, but they look a lot like the distinctions in the United States. It may affect probation. It could affect whether you get bail or not if you're charged with another crime. Because the question about whether you should be free pending a trial, meaning you get to go home while you wait for your trial, that depends on whether you're going to flee, whether there's a probability that you're going to flee, whether you're dangerous. That's another reason to keep someone in prison until trial. And dangerousness is assessed on the basis, in part, of whether you've committed violent crimes before, and also whether it would throw the administration of justice into disrepute. So whether you're free at bail is, if you've done some sort of really horrible thing, like sexual assaults caught on video, that's cruel, then even if you're not a danger and even if you're not going to flee, then the judge can say, no, you have to stay in prison until your trial, because it would just be crazy to let someone free on compassionate grounds until their trial when we have this much evidence of this heinous a crime.
Shannon wrote in her book that one of the victims brought up new allegations that were different from the original police report. This had to be addressed because it affected Jason's sentencing. And so a mini trial, a special hearing, would take place after Jason's guilty plea to determine the facts. The court proceedings resumed in 2007, where the victims and their loved ones, Shannon and her supporters, and Jason all filled the courtroom. For the first time, Shannon saw the women that her husband had kidnapped and brutally assaulted. The two women were no longer anonymous faces. They were regular women, just like me, with families who could have been mine, Shannon wrote. She wrote about the anxieties she battled leading up to that moment, after she had been thinking about them every day for 2 years. Would they or their families talk to me? Did they hate me and my family? Would they think we were on Jason's side? Jason pleaded guilty. Then testimony started. The victims testified about the horrors they endured, while Shannon listened to them speak in their own words about what had happened. One of the most moving new details was how one of the women, bound, had inched over to the other woman to let her know she wasn't alone. The women recounted the profanities and cruel things Jason said and did to them. Meanwhile, Jason was shackled, dressed in a suit, and kept his head down. Shannon noticed how detached his face looked, which reminded her of his eerily cold face that appeared on tape when he had secretly filmed people in their home. When he took the stand, Jason admitted he was a monster. He spoke in a robotic voice. There was no trace of the Jason, warm and sweet, that Shannon had known. His attorney asked if anything had happened to him to create his rage. We all have things in our childhood that affects how we are as adults, Jason said. Shannon wrote in her book that his voice was defensive and cocky. She said Jason's attorney was caught off guard. Shannon wrote, she made another attempt to urge him to present a broader or more complex picture of himself, asking him outright if he had suffered any abuse in his childhood or teenage years. Jason flat out said no, he hadn't. I was enraged, but I couldn't move. I wanted to yank him back, snap him out of whatever trance he seemed to be in. The newspaper headline read, "Monster Appears in Court." Jason's plea was in, and he was due back in court a few months later, still awaiting his formal conviction and the sentencing. On the phone with him afterward, Shannon said she angrily confronted him. How could he be so cold in court and show no emotion at all, or be honest about who he was and the abuse he had experienced? Jason told her he couldn't remember what he said on the stand. It was a blur, he said, as he felt everyone staring at him in the courtroom. It left Shannon more confused than ever. Was Jason suffering from a mental health disorder where he could detach himself from reality? Or was he lying and just trying to get out of any accountability? Shannon wrote, I felt trapped by the legal process, but at the same time wasn't sure if I stopped attending, I would feel any better. In 2008, she was back in court. The final phase was his sentencing. And for the first time since her husband had been arrested, Shannon was going to get the chance to speak to the court, too. She took the stand and gave a victim impact statement where she told her story about the life she once had with Jason, the knock on the hotel door that changed everything. And then something happened during a break in the courtroom, during a recess.
And I saw the victim, the second victim. She was 26 when this happened to her. So this is 3 years later. She's 29, and she gets up from the gallery and she walks across like her family and friends, like getting out of a row, and she starts to come down toward me. And the first thing I thought, and I think your readers should, or my readers, your listeners should picture like a really like a century-old, beautiful courthouse, carved wood, everything. The gallery was like a theater kind of, so she had to come down almost to the stage of justice. And I was coming through a wooden gate back into the gallery. And I saw her coming down, and all I thought was, oh my God, she must be so angry. She hates me. And then she just opened her arms. And she just put her arms around me. And I just got to hold her as well. And which is really what I wanted to do since the night that everything happened, was provide some comfort, to tell her that I loved and cared about her. And I was so sorry that somebody that I loved and cared about could do this to her. And she just said, she's like, I just want you to know, I've never thought you were part of this. I never thought you were responsible for anything. And I was just finally able to say, like, I've thought about you every day.
When the sentencing resumed, the two women gave their own victim impact statements. One victim now lived in constant fear. After the crime, she isolated herself from her loved ones and was struggling to focus and find her purpose again. She described the moment before she lost consciousness when Jason was choking her, saying that was when her heart broke, Shannon wrote. The other victim testified that she was scared to be around men at work. Since the crime, her mom and brother had passed away, and she was devastated she hadn't been able to spend more time with them since she had been recovering from her injuries. When she finished, the court was silent except for sobbing, Shannon wrote. Jason also took the stand. I am so sorry for the pain I caused you. I can't expect you to believe me, let alone forgive me, but I hope you will hear me when I tell you how filled I am with shame and remorse for what I did to you. It sickens me to remember the mortality of my actions that day, he said. He talked about how he had ruined his second chance and also hurt the people who loved him. Jason, who had already pleaded guilty, then accepted the dangerous offender designation. The judge said Jason had fooled his family and friends and then sentenced him to an indeterminate period in a penitentiary. Shannon wrote, everyone around me seemed to expect that I would feel relieved that the court process was over, but instead I felt drained and empty. The survival adrenaline that kept me going through so much of the turmoil had run out. All of the feelings, her memories, her experiences in the courtroom, all of that would get written down as Shannon penned her book, Through the Glass. Her book became a Canadian bestseller and was recently republished for an updated anniversary edition. She was in the process of recording the audiobook version in late 2025 when she spoke with Gabrielle, our court junkie writer who wrote this episode.
It's really the book that I needed to read when all this happened to me, and I couldn't find it anywhere. Writing the first draft was pretty painful, lots of reliving, but doing all the research and making sure I got things right and, revisiting some things just really helped my mind feel organized. And it helped move a lot of the just overwhelm of information, ideas, concepts, snippets of pictures in my mind that were all hanging out in the front part of the brain and wreaking havoc. It helped me move them to long-term memory where things can't hurt us. We can remember them, but we don't relive them anymore, because I worked through every single little shard of glass to put it into a mosaic. And that was a very, very good feeling. I still needed to do trauma therapy, absolutely. And it was so helpful. But the writing process helped me make sense of the senseless and feel that I had reins on my own life again. I really desperately needed to be vindicated from all of the knee-jerk reactions, the assumptions about my character that people made and put on me. And I wanted to help other people. I really wanted most directly to help other family members of people who've offended, because that at the time, when this first came out in 2011, and nobody was speaking out about their experience. And so when it came out originally in 2011, it became an instant bestseller, and it reached far more than I ever would have imagined.
Shannon would eventually find love again and become a mom, which is what she always wanted to be. She's the mother to 2 twin girls who are now in high school and lives in Toronto.
I think that's the inspirational part of it for people, is to know that in your darkest moment, I just believe there's always light ahead. There's always light, and at some point it's not going to be, something I know says it's not going to be another train coming in the tunnel, it's, and I want people to know that, and that, none of that really just came easily. It was the result of a lot of hard work, a lot of work to trust again. Lots of people said to me, how could you ever trust again? And all I could ever think was, how could I not?
She is now a restorative justice advocate and therapist.
I have a beautiful life. I have a beautiful life, which means that it's imperfect, and I'm okay with that.
Today, Jason is 56 years old and still in prison. We asked Shannon, is he still in her life?
I just spoke with him last week for the first time in a couple of years. We usually each year, the readers will understand how much I visited him in the beginning. And I always say my only rule that I had was that I would visit for as long as I thought it was helping me to move forward. But no one ever gave me a map about what to do. And so I had to be, just very in tune with myself. And then there were a number of years that we didn't really have any contact or certainly didn't see each other. And now I'd say for about the last decade, it's been like an annual, usually he sends me a birthday card every year. And then I send him a Christmas card in response. Here, he has a classification called dangerous offender. So less than 1% of people with that designation are ever released, but you do have the opportunity to come before the parole board every 2 years and make a case for yourself. And Jason has turned down every single one of his parole board hearings in the entire time he's been inside. So I think, what I know is that he doesn't ever want to hurt anybody again. And because he doesn't really know why he did what he did, he doesn't feel that it would be a good idea for him to be released.
And that's all for this episode. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Roussin. A special thank you to Professor Noah Weisbord for talking to us about the Canadian legal system. And thank you, of course, to Shannon Moroney for sharing her story with us. I'll include a link to her book, Through the Glass, in the show notes for those of you who want to check it out. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.
At Pluto TV, we're celebrating Black History Month with our free curated collection of Black entertainment.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Catch award-winning films like Dreamgirls, Monsters Ball, and Selma.
We must make a massive demonstration.
Iconic hits like School Days and Set It Off. Plus full seasons of shows like Tyler Perry's Sisters and Power.
I got you.
It's star-studded brilliant Black entertainment, and it's all free.
It's getting good.
This month and always on Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.